Mr. Heck?
Here.
Mr. Lounger?
Present.
Mr. McLean?
Here.
Mr. Tenbush?
Here.
Mr. Ty?
Here.
And Mr. Walker?
Here.
Good, thank you. At this time, we're going to open the meeting to public comment. We typically allow 3 minutes to anyone that wants to speak on the topic of zoning. And then we're going to go into our special meeting with Spicer Group. Who in the audience would like to speak? Gentleman in the back.
Take that gentleman first.
All right. Gentleman over here on the right, please let us know.
In Huron City, Michigan. Tell me when the clock begins.
Right now.
Okay, thanks. My brother testified about 2 months ago on solar, and it's something that's very kind of near and dear to our heart in terms of how we want to make our company be successful in the future. So I'm just going to very quickly give you the 3 major points of testimony that we've already submitted, just to kind of remind everybody of where hopefully definitely will stay within the first 3 minutes. So the 3 points that my brother, who's the treasurer, kind of noted was that Huron City Company is dedicated to the conservation of farmlands. This is a farm that's been in the system for 150 years and which will be competitive in today's marketplace. The company has invested in tiles and other technologies to make our farmland more productive. We are benefited inherently by the quality of the farmers who work this farm, and we are dedicated to making it, these farms our major income. Now, currently the company is seriously considering a modest but fiscally beneficial investments in solar panels on our property. As a Michigan corporation, we are allowed to pursue any business legal in the state of Michigan and many parts of the United States. I've done a bit of work on this. Farmers are investing in solar energy because it provides non-volatile income sources that's compatible with farmland and not bothersome to neighbors. I've been in close communication with Ocean Spray cranberry growers out in New Jersey, and they basically have seen that solar energy is a good complement, in fact, to their major interest, and that's cranberries. But the solar energy is a great resource, financial resource for them to basically deal with the ups and downs of the market volatility and ag prices, which we're seeing now and we're going to continue to see, unfortunately, I think, into the future. The way that my brother characterized basically our position last time was that solar farms, solar energy are not windmills. And I really want to make that distinction. My background is in natural resource planning out of both Cornell, where I went to the ag school there, and also got a graduate degree, a master's degree at the University of Michigan in natural resource planning. I am very beholden to the necessity to keep soils in place and keep a good, clean, open farming community as well. I have already contributed information of the pros and cons of solar energy, but I would only say it really quickly, that solar panels are low profile. They do not make noise. They do not flicker. They do not reflect. They cast shadows on the ground underneath them, not on their neighbors. Tree buffers make this enterprise unseen by neighbors. And I can give you my testimony here to kind of basically provide some of the pros and cons of solar. What I do want to comment just quickly on right now, though, are something that the Spicer Group is coming up with, and I want to make sure, in staying with my time, that I recognize that I don't know what the Spicer Group is coming up in terms of its specifications of where solar farms could be established or not. I would kind of make these comments, and these are new. What about the setbacks? What I am hearing is setbacks for solar have to be with 1,640 feet from another building. I would maintain that basically solar energy is it capricious or arbitrary? I mean, what are the standards? What's the justification for that? I mean, this is what we're struggling as farmers. We've got an area where it's large enough where we think that we can put in solar and make it, profitable for us. But it'll also make it profitable for the state too, because you've got also the thumb loop that's going through, and we feel that we can provide energy for that economy as well that needs to be filled.
Mr. Parcells, you're a little over 3, so please
Okay.
wrap it up.
Let me just say that, my final note is that the physical development of solar farms is self-limiting, in that it can only work near power lines. You will not see solar farms proliferating indiscriminately across the landscape, but they'll be confined to corridors, and I think they're basically environmentally sound, they produce money, and they will contribute to the incomes of farmers and to the township and state as well.
The land in Huron Township.
But I would kind of respond that I was at a township meeting. They really look up to the county of the county, so it's important
Right.
to see that connection as well.
I just want to make sure that you're aware of it. What we do here does not directly affect what goes on in Huron Township.
Correct.
Motion to direct the planning commission to start working on the solar ordinance. And my thoughts are, do not dismantle the wind committee, just change it over to a solar committee. And this way we could, accommodate for the farmers that can put in solar farms, are able to. And then after you get your solar ordinance finished, we can switch it back to the wind committee. Just try to move it along so, some of our constituents are able to put solar farms on their properties. Some of them are not in PA 116. Some of them do have proper setbacks. Just a little bit of direction.
So, to make sure that I understand this clearly, because I've got nothing in writing, I just heard about this afternoon. The Board of Commissioners would like us to kind of put wind on the back burner
Right.
and go full steam ahead with solar.
Yes.
And you are aware that we have been working on it as a group.
As the master plan,
Right, both
Mhm.
with the master plan and separate from the master plan.
but
We
that's
are-
not directly ordinance though.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
All right.
Anything else, sir?
Nothing. If you guys have any questions for me, just let me know.
Grandchildren, whoever suffering the consequences. So I'm going to present this information with you. Please make copies. Study it over before you move forward on this zoning plan.
This
It's-
just pertains to solar?
This strictly pertains to solar. There's 5 very important questions that should be asked to every company that's going to do business in Huron County.
Excellent.
Thank you for your time. I'll present this to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you for making the effort to come here and bring this to us.
All right,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank you. Who else? Mr. Gaffkey.
Robert Gaffkey. I want to talk about the complaint resolution problem with the wind turbines and just make light of a situation that happened just yesterday. But 2 weeks ago, I was called into a legislative meeting with Jeff Smith, Steve Vaughn, Steve Allen, and Dave Peruski and John Nugent. And in that meeting, Jeff Smith was very sure of himself and gave advice to the commissioners that it's okay to set up sound equipment in a polluted environment. And he said that all along for months and months and months. And as the commissioners yesterday and me and others in the audience came to a consensus that Heritage Energy's company that they have on retainer, Epsilon's sound study, should be peer-reviewed and looked at. Then at the end of the meeting in public comment, Jeff got up and said, that test, we can't look at it, it's no good. So that whole thing flipped, and Steve Allen gave a lot of bad counsel in that meeting, and I sure would hope, and I know there's a lot of bright people on this board, before you take advice from these leaders that are captaining the ship, do your own research and your own homework in solar, in wind, in whatever ordinance you're going forward to look at, because the advice of a couple people can sink a ship. Thank you.
Sir? Planning and zoning. Seeing no further hands, we're going to close public comment at this point in time. Move on to business at hand. Alan, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Today, we're here to continue the conversation on the development of your master plan for Huron County. When we last met, we had talked extensively about how to site commercial solar energy in Huron County. We've spent, I think, since October looking at a number of maps and various iterations on trying to figure out where solar should be located. So from there, I think we, at the last time we met, we reached some kind of conclusion. So with that in mind, I also I've brought a draft commercial solar energy policy statement and a draft wind energy policy statement. These were the two big policy statements from last year that we were asked to take a closer look at. Because there's a moratorium on wind, there's a moratorium on solar. We need to lock that policy down in the master plan moving forward. So I have those draft statements tonight, and also have a future land use map that we can look at. I'd like to start off with the wind energy policy statement, and then after that we'll look at the commercial solar energy policy statement. These are drafts, these are ripe for discussion. So without further ado, I'm going to hand them out. If you just take one and pass it down. I'm here if need be. Okay, so this policy is intended to allow wind energy facilities a transition toward becoming a more welcoming presence in Huron County. It takes a long-term view and accounts for the permits and approvals for existing wind energy facilities while balancing the need to improve the overall health, safety, and welfare of Huron County residents by limiting the future development of new wind energy facilities. That's the preamble. The text is, since 2005, with the adoption of the Agricultural Preservation and Alternative Energy Resource / Wind Energy Planning Amendment to the 1993 Huron County Master Plan, and through the Wind Energy Facility Overlay Regulations in the Zoning Ordinance, the Huron County Planning Commission has permitted the construction of 287 wind turbines. The first utility-scale wind energy facility constructed with the approval of the Huron County Planning Commission was in 2008, which was the 46-turbine, 96-megawatt Michigan Wind Project located in Bingham and Sheridan Townships. Leading up to today, an additional 241 wind turbines have been constructed alongside the 185 turbines built in townships with their own zoning regulations. As each new turbine was constructed, the landscape of Huron County has seemingly changed. With this change came a noticeable shift in attitude and public opinion about wind turbines and their effect on the overall character of Huron County. Even though wind turbines generate about, I think I got this just general number, $9 million annually in tax revenues for various entities throughout the county, support for the development of new county-based wind energy facilities grew to a tipping point in 2016, I think it's 2017 with the rejection of 2 wind energy zoning overlays at the polls. In addition, the survey conducted in September and October of 2016 for this master plan did not indicate a majority support for the development of wind energy facilities. With this shift in attitude, the county needs to strike a balance with the potential development of future wind energy facilities. On one hand, the zoning map defines where wind energy facilities can be located in Huron County by the placement of the various existing overlays, which can be amended to add more overlays. On the other hand, each wind energy facility has a useful life, and if such facilities are not repowered at the end of their useful life, they will need to be decommissioned, and once decommissioning is completed, the Huron County zoning map can be amended to remove any associated overlays. Repowering a wind energy facility would allow the operator to modernize and update the wind turbines and related infrastructure. Repowering would allow the associated overlay to remain on the zoning map. However, new permits would have to be issued by the county. Further, any wind energy facility that is repowered would have to comply with all current zoning ordinance requirements. Repowering could entail removal of the original wind turbines and related infrastructure, in part or in whole, and be replaced with new wind turbines and related infrastructure. Instead, repowering involves the operator of the wind energy facility to submit a plan showing the removal of the wind energy facility, whether in part and whole, and its replacement in which it is demonstrated that compliance with current zoning ordinance requirements is met by the repowered facility. Such a repowering plan shall maintain the use of the existing associated wind overlay. Decommissioning a wind energy facility would encompass its removal. The decommissioning never precedes repowering. A triggering event, as described in the facility's approved decommissioning plan, necessitates the removal of the wind energy facility. Such a triggering event might be the time when a portion of the facility ceases to generate electric power for a specified period, or it might be a time frame specified within the power purchase agreement with the utility. Decommissioning does not involve the issuance of any new permits for the operation of a wind energy facility. In order to ensure a full and complete decommissioning, at the discretion of the Huron County Board of Commissioners, the zoning map can be amended to remove the associated overlay for the former facility. There's an action plan with 7 steps. Modify zoning ordinance. 1. Modify zoning ordinance provisions for wind energy facilities to incorporate options for repowering. 2. Maintain database of wind energy facilities in operation in the county and track the commercial operation date with anticipated timeframes related to the power purchase agreement. Review individual decommissioning agreements for each individual wind energy facility. Outline a schedule for anticipated decommissioning or repowering. 1 year prior to the anticipated end of useful life, engage the operator in a discussion of options for repowering or for decommissioning. If the operation is repowered, then new permits will need to be obtained that demonstrate compliance with current zoning ordinance requirements. And finally, if the operation will be decommissioned, then allow the operator to initiate the decommissioning process. If not initiated on time, the county may initiate the process per applicable zoning ordinance requirements. Removal of the associated overlay on the zoning map can be initiated through the zoning amendment process. This policy is intended to provide options for repowering or removal.
I had asked you before about the possibility of an overlay district sunsetting after decommissioning. Did you do any research into that?
I think the sunsetting would have to be a proactive step by the county to initiate a zoning map amendment to remove that overlay. And this alludes to it. A sunsetting of a zoning ordinance provision, to my knowledge, is only incorporated in a process called a conditional rezoning, which is a process in which it involves a number of conditions to be offered by a developer prior to a rezoning. It's my understanding that has not happened in Huron County. These are strictly zoning map amendments to include the wind energy overlay.
Yeah. Overlay was the first step to putting the facility together. Okay. Members of the Planning Commission, questions?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I'd like to see a sentence in here where you're identifying the amount of turbines that's in Huron County. I'd like to see the total number included in here someplace. I mean,
Inclusive of the whole county, regardless if it's county zoning or township zoning.
correct.
Okay.
Correct. That's just me. And also an accurate annual tax revenue. You got 9 million here. If that's accurate, then fine. You know, I have no problem with that.
Jeff, generally, has that been kind of what's been running at?
I'm not sure where they're at. There's the discussion, I think not only this county, but townships that received a FOIA request for tax revenue from 2008 to current from wind facilities. The problem with that is it's not a problem, but the difficulty of that is that it's my understanding the assessors originally did not code things easily. So when say a turbine was built on John Smith's property, the assessor, obviously there was some taxation there, but the assessor may not have coded it in their system. So to try to track that, it can be obviously tracked, but it's gonna take time. Where today, the county, I believe the county, when they get a tax roll from the township, the turbine related infrastructure is coded as wind energy. There's an identifier, so if they can run a report a lot easier today because of the coding that BS&A allows in that system. I believe in 2008 and moving forward, a lot of the townships and possibly the county records may not be coded.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have to manually go back through all those jurisdictions and figure out what that revenue is. That's gonna take some time, so I don't know if there's an accurate number out there.
The intent of quoting $9 million is just kind of get a general idea of what's coming in. Is based off a news article that said between 2014 and 2016, this is how the revenue from the wind turbines was broken down, and I swagged it. There's a number that was like 11 million that came to the county. They break it down by schools, and other entities.
And it
So-
changes based on if they have IFTs, if they have, where they're at in their depreciation schedule, all those things. So it's an ever-changing number every year.
Right.
So I don't know if it's really a spot for us to name out that specific dollar amount in the master plan, I don't know.
Yeah, we could say, in the first year, we got X amount of dollars or something like that, because as these age, every year, they drop off in the amount of income you have coming in. Because they sunset in 6 years, I shouldn't say sunset, they flatline in 6 years at
It's
30%.
down to 30%, but it's more than 6 years, I believe, but regardless, but I don't know if that's something that, Alan, have you seen it in other master plans where you're referencing the actual tax dollars?
No, I'm just trying to indicate that the turbines,
There's a revenue source.
there's a revenue source there, correct.
I think we're gonna get ourselves into trouble putting a figure there.
Okay, then I would suggest humbly that instead of using a dollar figure, use a significant amount of tax revenue. If we can't come up with a figure, just say it's significant,
Perfect.
okay? Rather than use a number.
Yeah, I think putting a number out there is a
Yep.
great problem. down
Yeah,
the road.
it's changes, I mean, it's gonna change based on the depreciation.
Because if you look at from 2008 to 2017, it's probably increased every single year. Well, based on development, but now that, if in fact everything's constructed, now you're at the high point, now you're gonna see it decrease from here on out.
It's all downhill.
Unless there's other infrastructure brought in.
Correct. And we need to be very accurate on the number of turbines too, make sure we're spot on
Was that from the summary?
Yeah, if you add up the county permitting 287 versus the constructed in townships 185, that gets you to 400, I see 12, 6, 7,
472 is correct.
472.
I
If
just
you
like to
took
say
that
a
off-
total number.
Yeah, you got it.
Did you take that off the wind summary that I
Yes,
sent out?
so it's as
That
of
should
January.
be- That should be accurate.
Okay.
on that. Does the 472 include the loss of the one in Nelson?
Yes,
So it was 473.
correct.
Good. Any other comments from members? Suggestions, ideas? Things you don't like? Got a hand, Mr. Ty?
Just a question. How, on several of these are maintenance items, these are things that a person looks at and keeps track of over time. Both who would do that and where would the money come from to pay for the person to do that? Who picks the work up and who pays for that work? Am I misreading the additional work or work here, which by the way, sounds pretty good to me?
Yeah, that's a good point. So like on 1, the 2 would be the County Board of Commissioners and the Planning Commission. And if necessary, if you had to bring in a consultant, it all depends. I mean, there's some uncertainties here. It all depends on how you want to go about it. I know 3 years ago, when the amendment to the wind ordinance was in place, that there was a significant cost to that. If you were to amend the zoning ordinance specifically, you may work on it yourself, which would just be your monthly stipend. I don't want to say it's indeterminate, but you could put a range with that. Maintain the database. I would say it's Jeff's spreadsheet with the 472 turbines that is current as of January 2018. That's the database. That's just staffing costs.
In-house staff.
3, review individual decommissioning agreements. I think that's that's part of maintaining that database. Maybe add a column about specific points in the decommissioning, like if it specifies the option after 20 years to renew leases. I mean, there's probably a lot of variability in this. That would be a staff thing that he could generate a report and provide the planning commission and make it available on the county's website. Same thing with 4.
Alan?
Yeah,
You
I'm
have
sorry.
a question on that?
On that one, we talk about decommissioning agreements, or even number 4 too, that you were getting to. My question to that would be, in the event, the way the ordinance reads, or at least the 2015 ordinance, which whatever the current ordinance is when you get to a decommissioning timeframe, it states end of useful life is if that turbine is not producing power for a period of more than 12 months. That's a triggering event in the zoning ordinance. So, in essence, is there a need to, I guess, can we incorporate that triggering event into these actions? Because the ordinance calls out currently, but who knows what it would stay in 10, 15, 20 years, but currently it defines end of useful life as not generating power for a period of 12 months. And that's whether or not they have a power purchase agreement or not. If they have a turbine that is, say something would happen, there's a major structural issue with it where they can't run it, and they can't agree, and it just sits there and sits there and sits there, at the end of 12 months, that would be a triggering event automatically by our zoning that would trigger that decommissioning of that one turbine. But in essence, I've asked questions to different people in the past. You have a project running and they got a 20-year power purchase agreement. I said, what happens in 20 years? And that's the things I've heard is, well, there's a possibility that the power purchase agreement may be amended and extended, depending on the current market situations that are out there. It could not be amended or continue. It may be terminated in that event. If a developer wanted to continue to produce power, they'd have to sell it on the open market, not under contract. I believe there is one project currently in the Big Turtle Phase 2 is on open market. They're selling that power day to day. But they have a contract with Detroit Edison to take that power. But it's day to day. There's no power purchase agreement necessarily like the other projects where we guarantee to provide you this. So here's our capacity and this is what we're going to provide you. So those are a lot of things that I don't know if we really have control for the zone. That's a private contract issue. So I just trying to get to that point of understand where it's important to reference that, but in what aspect, I guess, would be what I question. And what legal authority do we have as a county or even a township over those provisions?
You don't, and that's the action plan, is basically maintain that database so that you're current, so that if new information were to be provided, say in year 15, the utility says, we're gonna repower right now, we wanna repower by the end of, in 2 years, and so then we wanna extend that another 10 years. And then, depending on if you've got a new zoning, whatever, depending on your provisions, you may say, well, if you're gonna repower, then you have to comply with the new zoning, and there's going to have to be a learning curve, discussion, and I don't want to say negotiation, but it's going to have to somehow be documented as we enter, what are we, year 10, year 11 for the Old Noble project, the first one. I mean, that's presumably halfway through its power purchase agreement. I don't know what it is. I'm sure it's documented, but we're now past the peak wind farm age, and so we need to be looking ahead to what are they going to do? What are they? 1.5 megawatt wind turbines?
Yes.
And the most recent one is double that?
3.4.
What is what?
3.45.
3.4. And so, we have to be aware of potential technological upgrades or just obsolescence. And so that's the whole point of this action plan, is have a way to manage that information flow. It's going to change. It's going to be different for each wind farm.
I think it's good that we have this outlined in here, because there may very well be changes in the next year in the current wind ordinance, and there could be others in the future as we learn, as we grow.
State policies may change, federal tax policies may change, all that plays into it.
Mr. Timish.
Couldn't we just, taking all the conversation recently into consideration, if you put in it per the current ordinance, should just about cover everything, because most of these things go through your office anyway, the zoning office, almost all of these.
Or like the decommissioning requirements, the Board of Commissioners approve, because that's a financial assurance
Right.
to the county or to those jurisdictions, it's through the county, but
If we put
Yes,
the verbiage in there
it's
per
in phase.
the current ordinance,
well, that's
Well,
what
that is in here.
the current ordinance, we would always require decommissioning, I understand that. But how does it apply? How do we accurately reflect the terminology so we don't get hung up with what's in this document as far as 20 years down the road? I just wanna make sure that we're consistent with what our legal avenues that we have. I know it's good to mention all these things, like the decommissioning, we have a permit performance surety bond in place for all the projects. But we don't regulate that, the owner operator of the project has that agreement with a surety company, which we don't have any control over, other than they can't cancel it unless the county agrees to it. So we have triggering events built into a lot of those existing documents, but how do we accurately reflect that in this plan? That's what I'm just questioning. It's good, I'm not questioning whether to have it there, I'm just questioning how do we make sure that, how do you term that? What do you put in here to determine how to address all those issues? Like the decommissioning plan, do we state the permit performance surety bond, the corporate guarantees, and the deposit account control agreements? That's what we essentially have for all the projects.
Those documents, you're saying, do we mention them in here? Because we have to tell, would it be beneficial to describe what will happen to those?
Or do we want to reference that those plans are consistent of, but not limited to, at least this? Because,
You're talking about repowering plans to be consistent with,
well, not so much the repowering, I'm saying decommissioning.
I guess, I'm free to, I'm open to wordsmithing here, but I guess is my understanding that that's all gonna be on a case-by-case basis and you'll deal with it as they come up. I mean,
These are more generalities in here. This is a stepping stone, a guiding point, but it's not ironclad. That's when we get into the
So,
regulatory
yeah,
things.
we can leave it more general.
I mean, you're going to abide by the terms of any agreements between the utility or wind developer and the county board of commissioners. I mean, this master plan will not supersede those agreements.
This just spells out our abilities, different things that we can do.
Yeah.
So just review each agreement, no matter what it is, just review it.
Make sure you're on top of it. I mean, just planning commission understands what's going on. It's in some ways it's kind of you're doing it already. It's kind of redundant to state it here, but keep sharpening this up. Stay on top of it. So let's just
But
put
it's
it in.
important to know that people know that we recognize the decommissioning.
Yeah.
And we're on top of that at the county level,
Yep.
at least.
And I think this policy states that,
Right.
yeah.
What other concerns do we have?
It's good discussion.
I got a question.
Yes.
At the end of 20 years, or 30 years, let's say, whatever the various leases are, there's always that option that the developer may want to renew with the landowner, and they may not have to repower or anything. They might say, well, these models, we suspect we could get another 20 years out of it. So what if they want to re-sign for 20 years? We don't have anything to say about that, correct?
We have no involvement in that
Right, as
area.
long as that we leave it alone, it's fine.
There's nothing in here, there's no triggering event that says at 20 years, you gotta actively decommission.
That was the point I was.
If you have a mechanical problem, you can't buy parts to fix it, it sits there for a year, you can't run, then you have to decommission it.
Like, we've had people call us, say, hey, such and such turbine's not operating for the last month, what's going on, and then we'll reach out, but say we had one sitting there for a 12-month period, then that in itself is the triggering event.
Right. And it has no bearing on what the contract is or isn't. Private individual. What are your thoughts, folks, on paragraph 2? Since 2005, with the adoption of agricultural preservation and alternative energy resources. That's how this all started out. And do we want to keep that in there, that we're still pursuing that avenue as a preservation mechanism in regard to wind turbines? Because if we keep that in there with this, are we going to be questioned or pressured to use the same type of statement in relation to solar? Solar's gobbles up a lot more land than wind turbines do.
This was allowed under PA 116 because you weren't distorting that much land. In some cases, actually gained land, tillable land, so to say. Whereas the state doesn't allow it under PA 116 because they are trying to preserve that because it is, as you said, pretty intrusive.
The first paragraph.
At the time that this was put in, it was, you know, a different situation. That's why I'm questioning this now. Is it time to maybe take this out?
The first paragraph is meant to give a historical perspective of how did we get here. It began right there. I mean, my understanding is that in the mid-2000s.
I have one question related to this. Is this paragraph still gonna be in the new master plan? Or is it gonna be a completely new master
It's gonna be
plan?
completely new. Okay. That's the whole intent of having these wind energy policy statements is to, set the new course.
But Ken, this statement would be in there, even though it's a new master plan, this statement would be in there as a historical fact.
Right.
Just as a
Historical
fact of history,
background,
but
where
that's it.
where we were and where we're at now.
I'm assuming that 1993 master plan, in 5 years from now, will probably be in the library somewhere, that it's still a referenceable document.
Yeah, because that's, goes back a long ways. That document should have been updated many, many years ago. Well before my time. Anybody have anything else on this document? Okay. All right. Share the next one with us.
Great, thank you, yeah. All right, we'll go into the commercial solar energy policy statement. I'll just do the same thing before. Take one and pass it on. This policy, everyone's got the copy in front of them. So the policy is intended to guide the Huron County Planning Commission on the development of zoning ordinance regulations that will permit responsible commercial solar energy projects that can be developed in appropriate locations. We begin by defining what it is. A commercial solar energy facility is a large-scale energy facility which occupies an area of land principally used to convert solar energy to electricity, which includes but is not limited to the use of one or more ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installations that primarily sell electricity to be used off-site. Developers have stated that it takes about 20 continuous to 150 continuous acres to create a viable large-scale commercial solar energy project. Currently, developers are securing leases throughout Huron County for large-scale commercial solar energy facilities to be developed on property that is zoned for agricultural use. The Huron County zoning ordinance lacks regulations for large-scale commercial solar energy facilities. Of the 452,000 acres of agricultural land in Huron County, 75% is enrolled in the Farmland and Open Space Preservation Program, commonly known as the PA 116 program. According to a fact sheet issued in May 2017 by the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development entitled Commercial Solar Facilities on PA 116 Land, a commercial solar panel operation is not permitted on land enrolled in the Farmland Development Rights Agreement under the PA 116 program. The fact sheet states that a commercial solar energy facility is not considered an agricultural land use, and therefore any land used for commercial solar energy for a commercial solar energy facility would need to be removed from the PA 116 program prior to the construction of such a facility. However, land may be released from the PA 116 program due to public interest if the land is rezoned commercial or industrial. Because agriculture plays such an important role in the economic and social fabric of Huron County, with farming and agribusiness as the dominant industries, agriculture is vital to the county's future. With the expanse of agricultural land available in the county, installation of commercial solar energy facilities is a serious threat to the viability of the county's agricultural economy, as it has the potential to remove large-scale swaths of productive agricultural land from the PA 116 program. It is the goal of Huron County to ensure that lands already enrolled in the PA 116 program remain in the program while directing the development of commercial solar energy facilities to marginal lands. This can be accomplished by drafting zoning ordinance regulations that permit commercial solar energy projects to be developed in a way so there are no unacceptable adverse impacts on overall health, safety, and welfare of Huron County residents, visual amenity and landscape character, biodiversity or nature conservation, local natural resources such as air quality or water quality, and public access and enjoyment of the Lake Huron shoreline and public parks. Action plan. 1, only 1. Add provisions to the zoning ordinance that will permit responsible commercial solar energy projects that can be developed in appropriate locations. A, such regulations should ensure that certain areas are excluded from commercial solar energy development, including all parcels that are residentially zoned, prime farmland for the NRCS, wetlands, lake water features, sand, gravel pits, and woodlands. Incorporate the following setbacks. A setback of 600 feet from homes on non-participating parcels, a setback of 300 feet from homes on participating parcels, a setback of a half mile from cities and villages, a setback of a half mile from townships that are not county zoned, a setback of a half mile from parks, a setback of a half mile from state land, a setback of 1,640 feet from wind turbines, and a setback of a half mile from the Lake Huron shoreline. C, a commercial solar energy facility that is allowed, C, a commercial solar energy facility is allowed as a special. Huron County does not want to encourage agriculturally zoned land to be disenrolled from the PA 116 program, thereby inadvertently necessitating widespread undesirable spot rezonings to commercial and/or industrial zoning districts. E, a commercial solar energy facility shall be screened along its perimeter with landscaping that obscures views of the solar energy facility from the Lake Huron shoreline and from residential areas, incorporating evergreen trees with a height at the time of planting in excess of 8 feet. All landscaping shall be incorporated into a perimeter buffer of no less than 20 feet in width. Ground-mounted solar voltaic panel installations and associated racking shall not exceed 12 feet in height. And finally, G, a commercial solar energy facility shall be sited and designed to minimize glint and glare effects on roadway users, nearby residences, commercial areas, and other highly sensitive viewing locations, and all applications shall contain a glint and glare study that accurately assesses and quantifies potential glint and glare effects and to determine the potential health, safety, and visual impacts associated with a proposed project.
Alan, I have to commend you. That was very, very thorough. Heck of a good job on that. Your thoughts, folks? George?
I have 3. I'll go from minor to major.
Okay.
The minor one is, have you done research for the 12-foot height of the structure restriction? Is that a reasonable one? I mean, what are other townships, what are other solar farms doing with that? I mean, is that 12? That seemed to me, just being a layman and not really being an expert, it seems a little on the low side. But what have you found?
Yeah. So, I think it's open for discussion.
Okay.
I did have a chance a year ago to tour the DTE facility or facilities in Lapeer, the ones that are located, you can see on I-69, on the north side of I-69, that are on city property in the city of Lapeer. And I'm just under 6 feet tall. And you stand up to them, and they're slightly higher than I am.
Oh, okay.
And so at least those panels are,
Right.
and then just considering the flat land here and having some kind of minimum tree height for a buffer, you know, and trying to address glint, you know, I think there could be some change to that. But, you know, I've seen some ordinances that allow up to 20 feet.
Yeah, I did 2 of those prior to those ones we've seen. Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, that might be acceptable in certain situations.
But is there an industry standard? I mean, what?
My research is that there's just so many ways to rack and stack and position solar panels that it's.
So 12 feet's workable.
I think so, but I'm not a solar
Right.
energy developer.
The next thing, and I know the focus is commercial, I get that, right? What I'm concerned about, though, is this document, when it's eventually finalized, I'm a little concerned that it might be an impediment to residential and agricultural development of solar systems, in the sense that, you know, with residential and agricultural premises, they just want to develop enough electricity for their own use and not really sell it back. I think it's important that this document not scare people off from doing that. I know you're addressing it For example, one Manchester Township in Washtenaw County nailed it on the head. They made it very clear what was considered commercial, what was considered residential or agriculture. And the thing that, why we have to really be careful with that is a really good residential system is going to obviously generate surplus electricities at time and not generate enough electricity for its needs at time. So the mechanism for getting around that flaw, or not a flaw, but that situation is to sell back the power to the power companies when it has a surplus, and then at times when it needs more power, it buys that back from. So in other words, it's getting a credit from, in other words, to make it simple, it's using the power company as a battery. It's not really trying to make money, it's just using it as a battery. So we need to be very careful, and that's where I think if we don't detail what we mean by commercial versus residential, it might scare people off thinking, wow, if I sell any of my, like a landowner, a person who just wants to put a solar cell in his backyard or on his roof, if I sell this power back to the power company, am I commercial? I know you mentioned, at least 20 acres, and that's fine, that's in the direction I want to go. It's just, can we make it clear, not only define what's commercial, but can we also define, okay, if you're residential or agriculture and you do sell some power back to that, that's okay, as long as you're, meeting the definition of what's considered residential and agriculture. Does that make sense?
I think it's a fair point. I did not say this policy does not affect, the smaller
Okay.
scale. That needs to be in here. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
I agree 100%.
Well, it's titled Commercial Solar Energy Policy. So
Right, I just don't want to scare off residential people.
And we differentiate on wind turbine use too between residential and commercial. There's thresholds that you have to meet.
I think in some language I've seen under our moratorium language that we have, it's grid connected. Commercial is grid connected. There would be no, those systems like the residential systems that they net meter and feed back into the
Right,
system.
right.
Have no
They're on
private grid.
they're on the beyond the residential meters, so the actual the electric grid distribution comes from your power company to your meter. But then after that, that's when they're all interconnected at that point, where a commercial solar energy system that's grid connected, there's no load source there other than the controls for the grid connected system.
Goes from the source to the
Directly into
transmission
the
substation.
I get the nuances. All I'm saying is let's, I get
Clarify
that.
that.
So right, this is a good document. Let's just make sure we're not scaring the homeowner from
Right.
doing something, with his rooftop, that's all. This is
Yeah,
not
we
scaring
could
them
we
away.
could add something into this document to
Yes.
point towards the other.
Where it says primarily sell electricity, it could be a provision in there referencing grid connected.
Yes.
Yeah, that-
And if you want to go to, I don't, you gave us this, didn't you? Or maybe you did, the Manchester Township one really has a great definition. You have,
I may have, I don't know if I got,
Bridges.
when you sent out packets, I don't know if that was in the packet or.
I think it was to the county planning commission members.
all right.
If
I can
you
get
don't-
it.
You
I'll
don't
read
have it,
that.
we can get it to you.
Yeah.
And then the third, the more major point is, and this sort of resonates with what Mr. Parcells said earlier in his comments. I wasn't here when the various setbacks were kind of given to you as a way to proceed with the draft. And so this is my first real opportunity to question those. And I'm not necessarily against them, but I guess, and Mr. Parcells said it really great, he used the phrase, I think, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but you said we want to make sure that we're not being arbitrary and capricious with these setbacks. And I guess, again, this is my first real opportunity to ask, what was, these various half-mile setbacks, 1,000-foot set. Now, first of all, let me back up. I was involved with the 1,000 foot from the shoreline, and I think that is necessary in the sense that we want tourists to come up here when they're driving down M25. We want them to look at the lake, we want them to look at the woods, we want them to look at cottages, bud shops. I get that. That's a good thing. But the other setbacks, which I wasn't really involved with, if maybe members of the commission can say, why did a half a mile come up in your discussions? What was the reasoning behind, for example, and again, I'm speaking as a layman, maybe I don't know the nuances of why this is necessary, but as a layman, just to be devil's advocate, why can't a solar cell go right up to a wind turbine? Why do you need a half mile setback? That's where I'm sort of, can anybody explain why we came up with those half mile setbacks?
Well, that one was somewhat, you could say, for safety issues. We're not really gonna get too involved with that, I don't think. I mean, if a regulation like that is in place, and we put the ability in there to waive those protections, which there are townships in the township I reside in, we did that as a way to take the township out of the negotiation process. Our job as planning commissioners is to make sure everything's safe, number one, for everybody in the community. Now, if somebody wants to engage in a private contract with somebody else and waive their rights, that's fine and dandy, and that's the way that we could take care of this situation, maybe to satisfy your concerns, but yet have protections in there for the public.
So I'm a little confused, so you're saying that a private landowner has the, sort of the authority to waive these setbacks? Or
They could if we put that provision
Okay.
in the ordinance. That can be done.
Okay.
It's not, I'm not saying it's there now, because all of this, everything's open for discussion right now.
Well,
It's set in stone.
and again, I just, for now, and again, I could change my mind, you know, I'm probably the dumbest person in the room, but I could change my mind, but for now, I just, except for the shoreline, and again, I'm doing this in the context of reading all these ordinances from other townships and counties, where you don't see anything about a half a mile setback, or 1,000, I mean, they talk about 75-foot setbacks and 100-foot setbacks, and then I see these 2,000-foot setbacks, and again, being not that clever myself, I was thinking, well, what is the safety and health involved in having a solar cell 100 feet from an existing wind turbine? What is the health and safety factor in having a solar cell a couple of 100 feet from a self-zoned township, for example? What if the self-zoned township, for example, I don't mean to rant on, I'll finish up real quickly. What if the self-zoned township wants solar? And we're all of a sudden saying, well, no, it's okay, but then it's going to be a half mile setback from that township boundary. Again, as a layperson, I don't understand the logic as far as how that's promoting health and safety. So I'm questioning these half mile setbacks. That's all. I'm get off my soapbox. And again, my mind can be changed, but right now I'm going to take a hard look at why we have these setbacks as we do. That's all I have to say.
If you, I believe you were sitting out here when we had the gentleman from, Michael Lorenz, what township is he from? Brookfield.
Mhm.
He is outside of the wind overlay district, but he's being affected by what's allowed inside that district. So that's why we put a fairly substantial buffer in here, in theory, at this point in time, so that we don't have spillover from one jurisdiction to another. Yes, sir.
Bob, to that point, and also George's, for instance, you have a 600-foot setback from non-participating parcels. Well, then you have a 2,640-foot setback from townships that are not county zoned. Well, let's just say that other township, they are non-participating parcels along that corridor. If they don't object, then it doesn't pertain to them, but if they do object, we already have it in on the 600 foot. You don't need a half mile setback. Follow me?
Well,
In other words,
if you're not county zoned, it's half a mile, that's what it says.
Right.
right.
But what I'm saying, Bob, is if on the, if you have on the top, it says 600 feet from a non-participating parcel. Well, let's just say everybody on the other side of the road.
That's from the home itself, not from the parcel.
So think of a township that's county zoned, where there's a parcel that's participating next to a parcel that's not participating with a home, that solar panel has to be at least 600 feet from that home on that non-participating parcel.
Okay, but on the opposite side of the road is another, let's say it's another township,
And yes, we have.
and it's not county owned. Why does it have to be a half mile? If it only has to be 600 feet on this side of the road?
Because again, you don't.
I think it's a good question. I can tell you from personal experience over the past year, I've had officials from other communities in Huron County tell me that it would be wise if the county addresses an appropriate separation between their jurisdiction from all the, how do I soften the language? From all the uses that the county will allow that aren't necessarily compatible with that community. Specifically, that, I mean, it's not everybody, but I've heard it, that there's a concern about that the county would allow facilities too close to their jurisdiction and wouldn't want that in their, and they say they don't want that in their jurisdiction. So, you know, I think half mile is a discussion point. I just, that sentiment I've heard multiple times.
It's a mechanism to be aware, concerned, and appreciative of your neighbor, that you're not bothering them in any way, shape, or form. What you're doing here isn't spilling over to create a problem or a nuisance or.
I think half a mile relates back to the 3 mile with the turbines around the 90-mile shoreline. I mean, I know I agree with Kim Walker, he's brought it up several times, you know, the half a mile goes further. I mean, it's more residential, summer resorters, and, you know, part of Harbor Beach or whatever, Port Hope, is further in than a half a mile from the lake. But that kind of protects probably 50%, the half a mile of the 90-mile 25 all the way around the county. I mean, I think that's where that number kind of, you know, it's 3 mile per turbine, and half a mile kind of fell in place for solar. I mean,
Yeah, and we wanted some consistency between the different items.
True, right.
We didn't want to be all over the
Moving
map.
in and out, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, we discussed a mile from the shoreline at one point in time.
Right.
Exactly.
What happened to, I thought that's what we agreed to.
I took a poll of everybody when I was here last time. One person said 1 mile, another person said a mile, another person said half mile to a mile, another person said a half mile to a mile, another person said half mile, another person said a mile, another person said a mile. So,
Sounds to me like a mile.
We took the liberty to block it.
I could put 3/4 of a mile in there. That seems to be a happy medium, but I mean,
It sounds like the majority agreed with a mile. And now we have half a mile here.
you want to take another count?
Yeah,
Mine's a
I
mile.
mean, this is getting very interesting. I mean, here it is. But the potential language in the zoning ordinance is in front of you, and so. So let me just take a little side track, and we'll come right back to that. So these are guidelines that you incorporate in your zoning ordinance. We're not mapping overlays. We're not showing where it can and can't be. We're setting standards moving forward. So with that, you know, the maps that we created over the past 6 months helped us get to this point. I think there's a comment about it's not so much that we prevent solar from developing in specific areas, but that we have a set of guidelines to make sure that it isn't disruptive and that it's compatible. And so, what is compatible with the shoreline? I will say, when I was here in April, I heard a half mile to a mile. So, if we want to go around and do another consensus poll, I mean, this is worth discussing and changing. Jeff, do you want?
Mr. Cambush?
Yes, just to bring everybody up to speed, when we talked about that, not including your 1 mile setback on that, on non-participating land, it was 583.125 feet from non-participating average,
Right.
and 448.75 with both put together is 515. Of the ordinances that Jeff captured for us, the average on the ones that you gave, and then I also included Bridgehampton into that. And I've got 2 more here for you to get onto the docket. It's actually 57.14, and when you add in the new ones that I found, plus Bridgehampton, it's 51.66 feet.
You're saying a setback,
Setbacks.
51 feet.
From resident, or not residential, but non-participating and participating.
Property line.
Yes. property
51
line.
feet?
Yes.
And I want
So that's just something we gotta take into consideration where we're at, and I think we need to go deeper into the United States where, like you indicated, New Mexico, California, those areas that have large farms, what are they doing?
One thing to keep in mind, and George, I wanted to address this with you. Just because 10 other people do something doesn't mean it's right. You know, these ordinances that we're looking at are just food for thought. We have to do our homework, our research, and decide what fits Huron County best, what makes the most sense for Huron County. So we may not be able to pin this animal down right here tonight, but we definitely need to discuss it and think about it, do our due diligence. Yes.
I wanted to touch base with Alan, and that kind of relates to George's concern and Bob's concern. The setbacks, and I know we discussed it previously, you look at zoning in general, and if I refer to the zoning statute, we've talked about our whole commercial solar is under a special use provision. The state says for special use permits, you take consideration of those properties within 300 feet. That's the law. And here we have half-mile setbacks. So that is a little bit, how do you defend a half-mile or 20, or even a quarter-mile setback when your special land use process through the state of Michigan, the legislature has stated you give people within 300 feet the right of refusal, first refusal.
Yeah, that's just
Objections.
for notification.
Well, but they have,
And
they're regarded as a separate class of neighboring property owners. The state doesn't tell us to send a notice to everyone within a mile of a proposed project, or a half mile. It says 300 feet. And then you go back to all these other ordinances that I've seen, and along with Bob, they're your standard zoning regulations that you have, whether it's 50, 60 feet, 45. So I've had people call me and concerned of what justifies these setbacks, and I know we're trying to use wind, and I can help George with his question about the turbines. If you have a turbine standing there that's 500 feet tall or 499, and there's an event where you have a catastrophic failure, stuff goes 500, 600, 700 feet out. It happened in Oliver. We have experience with that. That was a volatile event where that thing tore itself apart, very volatile. But everything landed within the setbacks that were in their zoning ordinance. So everything was less than, I think the most farthest point of any piece of the turbine was like 700 and some feet away from the base. So if you're looking at it as that kind of point, the turbine manufacturers have stated as a safety area, 1640. So I think you could justify that based on the turbine manufacturer's data and our experience with one happening in Huron County, that in regards to that specific use, maybe 1,000 or 1,640 feet would be applicable. But is it applicable along the boundary where, for instance, if we're abutting Oliver Township and Oliver Township is wanting to have commercial solar and then we require a half-mile setback from that other township, that's gonna perturb a lot of property owners. Especially if there's property owners that don't have their land in PA 116 and it is marginal, then how do we as a, how does the planning commission, the county planning commission, review a application for a project in it? If our master plan says 1640 or a half mile or 2640, but yet all the other conditions meet it, then are we consistent with our master plan? So that's where it's important to get the measurements right now at this point. You know, consider all these other situations that we're presented with.
Mr. Walker?
A couple things, on the deal about the half-mile setback from a self-zone township, would it not be possible to allow that to be changed if that self-zone township had a solar ordinance?
You'd have to have agreement from both sides of the fence there. You'd have to have agreement from the county, you'd have to have agreement from them.
Right.
You have to have a provision in the ordinance when it's written to allow a waiver of those protections.
That's what I'm saying. If, you know, you've got that half a mile there in a county zone township where none would be allowed, but say in the adjoining self-zone township, they're going to allow it, then there's really no reason for the county to have that half-mile setback. And it seems like that could be agreed upon between the county and the self-zone township and somehow get written in an ordinance. I wouldn't know the wording, but that would alleviate that concern.
Sticking point I can see at the moment there would be, what number would you pick and who's gonna pick it? And what rights do the citizens have for input into that? You know,
Well,
do you
as
include
far as
everybody
the-
within 300 feet, which has traditionally been done in the past?
As far as the county goes, shouldn't it be the same as for anyone else? Beyond that half-mile setback, the restrictions, which are tentatively these. And the other thing is, I don't see anything in here on a setback. I see a setback for a non-participating parcel from a home. I think there ought to be something from a property line.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
Everything in planning and zoning and taxation and land use rights always go to the property line.
Correct.
Mr. Tembush, you have a comment?
Yeah, it seems to be the big sticking point is B on all these setbacks. Does the policy have to state the setbacks?
No,
When
it's
we,
not.
so why, if we just change the verbiage, Alan, on B to something that, relates it back to the pending ordinance that we gotta, that this,
Consider the following recommended
Yeah,
ranges
because
of setbacks.
all these could
Right.
change once
Right.
the committee comes up with the final and it goes through this, commission and also the zoning, board of commissioners, and not just the board of commissioners. Once they approve it, well, then it can be put in here if you want, but just a statement that
Yeah,
says,
this is quite specific.
yeah.
John?
How do you define your solar feasibility map, which the magenta areas were based off of these restrictions, correct?
Right, the map
The
is.
future land use map. So
Well,
or the solar feasibility map.
Right.
So
If we're trying to balance,
we might have to, if we look at this, we're gonna have to look at the map too.
Understand.
Alan, would you agree?
well, my take when we looked at this 2 months ago is that there's a lot of head nodding about, like, okay, it looks like there's going to be areas, there's potential for areas for solar development and areas that'll be restricted. No one said this, but my take was like, I think people sense that there's some kind of balance here. I mean, if you're in magenta, you can't develop. If you're outside that, then there might be other factors depending on your site design that would prohibit or limit or control development of solar.
Isn't the magenta though based off of these setbacks that you proposed to?
Yes. Except that I don't have, I mean,
We don't have to have
there's a potential range for the setback from the shoreline. There's, from the homes, I don't have the data on the home locations, and so I can't really map that. What's participating, what's not, I can't map that.
yeah, there's a lot of variables that you need to take into account.
I think this is these maps were a tool to get us thinking about what regulations make sense. We were able to visualize what these setbacks could look like, and it conveyed to me that we're on the right track. Now that we have specific numbers, I think it's natural to like say, oh, wait, what does that mean? And I think it's a great discussion. This is why we're discussing it. B could be considered these recommended range of setbacks. I mean, to Mr. Heck's point, I mean, he's asked, well, I thought it was a mile, and my notes indicate, a range, and so maybe it's a little bit to the point if we say, a recommended setback range of, a half mile to a mile, or I mean, we're not saying 51 feet. We're giving a range of, say, a half mile to a mile. They're different scales, because it sounds like that there's going to be a committee looking at solar specifically, and so these two things are going along at the same time, and so one should be. I mean, it's quite possible there's a possibility of your zoning being adopted zoning for solar adopted prior to the master plan being adopted. You may not want to do that, but
I don't foresee it happening quite that way. I think the two will hopefully come together about the same time.
I guess I'm just providing a basis for why you want to have a range.
And I concur with Mr. Heck. That was the impression that I was under, was the perimeter around the lake shore. You know, we talked 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, we got 3 miles for turbines. And eventually it got down to 1 mile, is what I thought was uniform around the lake shore. But obviously all this, there's nothing set in stone at this point in time.
Yeah, the average, just looking at your notes, is .78, so what you said, 3/4 of a mile is pretty close.
You get the calculator out.
Yeah.
You beat me. Yeah.
And if you take that 3/4 of a mile as an average, and we whittle it back to half a mile here, we'll be more generous at that point. I would say that we probably will not get this pinned down tonight. What's your thoughts, folks? I mean, this may need further thought and research.
Personally, I don't have any heartburn with most of it, other than the stated distances. If there was an arbitrary, I hate that word, but an arbitrary statement of some kind that covered that as a policy, you know, statement.
More general.
Yeah, more general. Yes, residential, private, solar, like if you put it on your roof, you can't extend over the peak of the roof, or some have it 2 feet over the roof. Some say no more than 5 feet, can't extend over the eaves, you know, that type of thing.
We don't need that actually in the master plan, but we definitely in the master plan want to differentiate between private solar
Okay.
and commercial solar. This is a roadmap of what we envision for the future, where the county may go. This does not pinpoint and regulate everything. This just gives us the outlook of where we want to go. Mr. Heck?
But the thing is, people will look at the master plan and say, okay, here we got 600 feet, you know, we should stay with 600 feet, or.
Well, yeah, we've got to be careful what we put in here numerically.
So I agree with, I think it was Robert here who said, just take the distances out, and the ordinance will take care of that.
Yeah, we'll say, like, such a amendment to the zoning ordinance should consider setbacks pertaining to non-participating parcels, setbacks to participating parcels, setbacks from property lines, setbacks from cities, villages, possibly from townships that are not county zones, setbacks from parks, et cetera, et cetera.
As per county ordinance.
As dictated in the county
Yeah.
ordinance, yeah.
Statement.
What he said, that would work as a policy statement.
Yeah.
Consider these items.
Otherwise, people are gonna look at these and go, oh, wait a minute,
Well,
master plan
what we
says
could do is
2,600
keep
feet.
these
Correct.
items in
And
there.
they're gonna take that as policy as opposed
I agree,
to
Jerry.
our ordinance.
Or you could have these as, merely as recommendations to be defined later, or something.
Right.
To be defined in the ordinance.
And-
What
and
I'd like to do is say that it was discussed at meetings in early 2018 that I think it's okay to say in a master plan that there are a number of options discussed, a half mile to a mile from the shoreline,
Yes.
100 feet to 1,000 feet from a home. I mean, I think it's okay to essentially document the nuance of the discussion
Yeah.
without arriving at the
Document
conclusion.
the fact that it's been
You know,
looked at, talked about through multiple meetings, and will be further researched and pinned down in the ordinance. And the ordinance, you could put in there too, that the ordinance will establish the guidelines, and those guidelines may be updated and changed from time to time as needed in the future. Or as the need arises to do so in the future.
And as someone brought up, you know, maybe we can get some help from the media, that's out there stating, these are the ranges we're looking at, and we invite, as Mr. Curry said, the public to come in and tell us what they're thinking, you know.
I always encourage the public to give their input. And they don't have to come in person, they can mail in a letter.
Write a letter, or just.
Send Jeff an email, whatever the case may be. If you have input or concerns, absolutely let us know. What else, ladies and gentlemen?
I have a map. That's your future land use map.
Okay.
That looks at future land use in Huron County. take one and pass it on. The main map is the overview, and then there's some zoom-ins on the following pages. This was discussed about a year ago. I think throughout, I think we had thought that we would put an overlay on the future land use map. I don't think we're doing that now. So where we left off is looking at, well, what we did is we took all your zoning information, I believe this was in late 2016, early 2017, and looked at where your areas are zoned for business and industry, and just thought through what areas could be expanded. And those expanded areas are shown on here. I would say the overall takeaway point on this is that agricultural land uses are preserved throughout the county zone townships on this future land use map. Huron County, through its future land use map, is clearly stating that it wants to continue to be a rural and agricultural county. And in targeted areas, mostly around Pigeon and Windsor Township, around the village of Seawing and Seawing Township, and a couple places in Bingham Township, around the village of Ubley, that commercial and industrial areas are expanded. You can see those on the map. As you may know, the future land use map guides future rezoning requests. So if an area, say on the east side of M53 in Lincoln Township, is indicated as commercial on this map, and a rezoning request were to come in, and it was zoned agriculture, and the area was shown to be commercial, then you would have a good justification for rezoning it to commercial.
We have to go through the ZBA.
Nope, that would be for variance. So for a rezoning request, there would be a public hearing here, and then go to the Board of Commissioners.
Would you help me out on this?
Yeah,
Brandon,
go ahead.
this-
Yep, that,
If a parcel or part of a parcel became zoned commercial so that solar could be established on it, have I worded that correctly so far?
good question. Per the draft policy statement we just went through, we said it allowed on agricultural land only as a special use, and it can't be PA 116.
Okay, so special use would restrict then a conversion from commercial solar to a shopping mall without further ado.
I think I follow what you're saying. In no case, in the way the master plan and these statements we looked at today, in no way should a developer be motivated to rezone property to commercial to allow solar. The term commercial in the policy statement that's just the word to describe it. It has nothing to do with the zoning of it. So you have to have agricultural land in Huron County, or in Huron County zone townships to allow a commercial solar facility. It's not going to be rezoned to commercial, because the list of uses for the agricultural district would say what are uses by right, which are simple site plan review, and then special uses, which include special use permit, or special uses which require site plan review, public hearing, and additional development requirements.
Okay, the reason I headed there was something that we've already put to rest and put to bed. Okay, and that's this section that says setback for 600 feet for homes non-participating, setback 300 feet for homes participating. So if it's on a participating piece of land and the owner wants to sell the house, do they have to get rid of their solar, or are they is it impossible to sell the house? And this is kind of a parlor game question, you could say, but I think it reinforces the importance that these setbacks can be played with. And that's all I wanted to know about this and that.
Yeah, back on the solar, yeah, the setback from a home does raise the parlor game issue you bring up. What I did put in there, which will be in there, is setback from property lines. If you're non-participating that's pretty clear, that if you're not participating, then the solar facility has to be the specified distance. Because the parlor game being, if you put in the solar facility and the parcel next to you wants to put up a house, the solar facility is 50 feet from the property line, then they have to be 550 feet away from their own property line. How is that fair, right? And so I think
One of the many.
yeah. So it's a good point.
Well, that's exactly why in Paris Township we did it the way we did. We put in strong provisions and protections with the ability to waive those. So if a guy's got a parcel of land that he's bought, say 5 years ago, also the neighbor puts up a wind turbine or a solar array, whatever, it doesn't circumvent this gentleman's plans of putting his retirement home on a piece of property or whatever, and it takes the township, or in this case the county, out of the negotiation process and puts the neighbor in control of his own destiny. And if the developer really wants to put that facility in there, then they work with that neighbor and come to an agreement of some sort, whatever it may be. We have nothing to do with it. To me, that makes very good sense.
As long as it doesn't refer to a story.
But
We don't want to be a part of that.
there's only so much you can do. You know, you do the best you can and chips fall where they may. There's always going to be an exception to the rule. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Bean? Yes.
We focused on this commercial solar, grid connected, only allowed in agricultural districts under special use.
Yep.
But why would we not allow it in any district under special use? Like I say, existing commercial site where the, for instance, Sebring Active Industries was demolished. What if someone wanted to take that existing industrial site and put solar on it?
Well, we've talked about that before, that we were gonna allow it on existing commercial
But-
sites
But
and or possible
that's where I
encourage some
think we need, maybe,
expansion.
there's that policy statement, isn't it, where it's allowed as a special use in the ag district?
That's what it says. I may have forgotten. I mean, are we going to allow it also as a special use in commercial and industrial zoning?
Well, it depends on how we allow it there. It could be a use under commercial.
You mean, we'll make that a permitted use then?
It could be, I'm not saying we should, but you gotta do it one of two ways. It's either gotta be a use by
Or do
right
you
or a
want-
permitted use.
Discretion over special use, do you want discretion in any district, or do you want specifically to ag? I'm just bringing that question up.
As written, it's geared towards ag because they need 100 acres, give or take, to have a viable project. And I guess you might get that outside the village in Sebring Township, but then you're close to the shore.
And you gotta be 600 feet from the house.
It's
That
written-
wouldn't work anyway.
Most instances it would.
So that's why I'm back to the point where
Most
if
instances
you allowed it as a permitted use in a
It would be
commercial
too
district,
close.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm
the
saying.
house is no longer an
One
issue,
person talking at a time.
right? Terry's question was if there's a house there, right, Terry?
Yes.
But what happens if, say you live next to a commercial or industrial district, you know, across the road from,
Mhm.
or say you live by Tower, in 20 years, Tower's gone, you know. I'm
Mhm.
not saying that it's gonna happen, but if that land is zoned commercial or industrial, how do we wanna allow, or would we allow commercial solar there on that land?
Well, if you have your setback from the house, if you say 600 feet setback from the house, that'd be pretty hard to meet even with active industry
But-
or tower.
What I'm saying is we're not addressing, is it allowed in any other district? We're only saying commercial solar energy is allowed as a special use in the ag district.
At this point in the conversation, the only place it's allowed potentially is in the ag district under a special land use.
Correct.
Yes,
Sebring having our own utility,
right?
we have to be self-sufficient. I think it's 2025, Mr. Corey, is it, or 2030? So we have a piece of property that part of it is being developed, the other part is not. That actually, we've had conversation with our light and water superintendent on possibly doing solar there because we own our own utility. We are required
That'd be your
in
own
a certain,
percentage.
right.
How is that property zoned?
It's,
Probably industrial.
industrial.
So
It's
your,
the old
your,
LMS
right.
area.
So your ordinance would allow commercial allow that use permitted in that district? Because-
We're working on our master plan too at this time.
Alan, is it not okay to reference all the, or other districts as how we're going to?
Yeah, I think if you want to allow it in other zoning districts, we should have that conversation. We alluded to it months ago. Should it be in commercial? Should it be in industrial? I think the discussion was the concerns about the wide scale development of solar is going to take place on agriculturally zoned land. And so that's where the county's at. You know, the commercial and industrial that's in county zone townships is minimal. Strategically, though, they're located to the villages and cities, which they're going to have their own zoning, and they might have situations like Lapeer does, where they can say, sure, we've owned this land for 50 years, why don't we lease it to a utility, and we can earn revenue and taxes and all that off it. And then you say, well, we're abutting this county zone township, what are they doing? And we'd like to expand to the west, or whatever. And so, I mean, if you want to expand to the west and it's a county zone township and it's zone industrial, right now we don't have regulations for that. And I think it's just a simple matter of, you know, if the protections that you come up with in the regulations in the agricultural district, if they're to simplify the process and to make it uniform across zoning districts, if you want to allow it in commercial and industrial, well, you set the mold as you go through this for your agriculture, and just say, well, let's amend the commercial district to allow commercial solar as a special use, and then the same thing for industrial.
I think we should afford the same protection. So maybe, that's what the only point I wanted to make in that is that comment where it says it's a permitted, under special use permit in the ag district, maybe we just take out either state, add applicable districts of the zoning ordinance, or, I know we're primarily focused on ag land because that's where we've been seeing the push from constituents and developers possibly, but I think that if you, if I just open this document up and that is our policy, that it's only permitted as special use in the ag district, then my question comes is, well, is it even allowed in the industrial or commercial district? Not that we would actually see it there, but I'm just saying down the road, what happens if we have a vacant factory building that is demolished and you end up with a large tract of land that is sitting there? I'd rather see a solar set up there than a waste disposal site that could be toxic, something like, things like that. So I'm just curious if we should try to mention all the,
we could add that verbiage into C of your action plan, where it does state special land use in agricultural zoning district, to include, or however you wanna word it, the industrial site, current industrial site that may be decommissioned, as long as it fits within the parameters of the zoning ordinance that we come up with, something to that effect.
or do we word it as it's allowed in any district under special use? Because I think that's what chapter 15 in our zoning ordinance is about.
I think I'd open it up to anything. I would say agriculture, industrial,
Well,
or commercial.
excluding residential, I think would be the primary concern.
If you just name three, then you got it covered.
So would you name industrial, ag, industrial, and commercial districts?
I think that makes sense.
We wouldn't want it in the R1 or R2 districts, we wouldn't want it in the multifamily district.
Right.
You don't want it downtown district.
But you could have that in a industrial, like the Dooley's instance, the LMS factory, you could have it in that corridor in a fashion, it wouldn't be any more intrusive than what we have along 53 or Fillion Road.
Or what was even there before.
Yeah, so
And part of what's still there now.
you gotta remember, you still got a mess across the street, so.
I think the easy way is just to add in-house.
Two, commercial and industrial. Or business, I mean, business and industrial is how it's written in our ordinance, I believe.
Let me just,
Yeah, but you don't wanna open it up to the business district.
Yeah,
And that is commercial in our ordinance. We only have business and industrial.
I'd leave it at that.
do we, here's something to chew on. Because of the MDARD, May 2017 memo that says, to take it off P116, it's rezone it to commercial industrial. Are we now, would allowing in those districts?
But that's ag district.
Yeah, it pertains to ag.
And while we're not rezoning, we don't want to rezone ag land to industrial or commercial business, or if you want to say commercial or business. We don't want to rezone those large tracts of land for industrial use, because what happens if down the road the solar comes out, we don't want to open that up for, we want to preserve the ag.
Yeah, once you
So I think we need to
convert it-
specifically name those districts.
You convert it to industrial, then anything allowable under industrial can come in at any time.
But that's a provision to get it out of P 116, is if you rezone it to commercial or industrial use. But we generally don't see that, and I don't think many jurisdictions would want that. They would wanna take their farm fields and convert them to industrial sites. Out of necessity, I know the county has considered that for, like, the coal sanitation landfill, but that's to serve all county residents, so.
Could a situation ever arise where a solar developer would say, I know your land is a PA 116, but we ran the numbers, it makes sense for you to pull it out for that public interest and we get it rezoned to industrial, and hey, Huron County zoning ordinance allows commercial scale solar and industrial, let's go that route. I think we got an avenue to expand or to develop a solar facility.
It's a very good point, because they are offering to pay the fees to do so.
It seems unlikely to me, but
Wanna do that.
I just, would it be an inadvertent loophole?
It would be a problem with spot zoning, though, wouldn't it? If it's not continuous.
Well, what if it is continuous?
Well, that's a whole different ballgame. That's a corridor then.
He did that exact
Be an
thing in
industrial
Elkton.
corridor.
He went all the way from Elkton out to, Moore Road and south a half mile, quarter mile. And rezoned that all industrial, commercial, just to reach one farm. I don't know if it was in 116 or not.
Right.
And we've had two zoning cases I can remember that we took ag land that was surrounding an existing commercial or industrial site for many years. And they've added to it, like Countryside Transport or Goshen Furniture.
And castings too.
And, yeah, also, Blue Diamond, I think, was rezoned, because they kept buying more property, more farmland to kind of expand their industrial use. So in those three sites, we have done that as a county in the past. Taken that farmland and rezoned it, and that's always been a condition even of the sale of the land, that they get the zoning first, but how does that all fit into commercial solar? That's,
Something we need to research and think about. What are the ramifications if we do, what are the ramifications if we don't? You have to make a chart,
It'll
pros
be
and cons.
discussed in the committee with the solar, I'm sure,
Yeah.
many times over.
Well, we've got to think about how we're going to either incorporate or not incorporate into the master plan. Is it gonna stay strictly ag, or are we gonna open it up to others?
Okay. I've got good thoughts to revise the statements. You've got time to look over the future land use map, just questions or other considerations. Incorporate them, I think.
Bob, what if, like where Bob Tembush said in letter C, they're adding, commercial and industrial, what if you use the word current? Current commercial and industrial.
Yeah, current or existing, that makes good sense.
As adopted, as
As-
adopted in this master plan, as of the effective date of this master plan.
Yeah,
And we're not encouraging future rezonings.
right.
Right,
Good. And you're still allowing it
right, you're not cutting them
where
out.
you can.
Good point, very good point. Yep. Commissioner Cory?
I was just looking over the commercial solar energy policy statement, and in the wind energy policy statement, you have, a decommissioning, and I'm not sure if, Mr. Bean missed the decommissioning of solar, and maybe that's something that needs to be placed in the statement also.
Yes.
Yep.
Good thought. Very good thought. Thank you.
Could reference current ordinance or current, you know, something to do with our ordinance that we're going to be developing.
And we'll have to conform to the Board of Commissioners policy. What else?
Should there be anything on lift, wind lift on those panels? That they're structurally designed?
That likely will be addressed in the actual ordinance, more so than the master plan.
Okay.
You know, we don't try to cover all your bases in the master plan. Again, that's the roadmap, the guide to what road are we gonna take, what do we want the county to look like, and then we pinpoint the specifics in the ordinance itself. I would suggest to everyone to look these documents over, think seriously about the setbacks, and get back with myself or Jeff if you see something else in the meantime, so that we can get that information to Mr. Bean as quickly as possible before he gets his next revision put in place. Anything else we should know on these land use maps?
No, some places, the yellow is a little small area, like, the Sea-Wing Township in the southeast corner. You can see a little bit, I need to tweak the colors a little bit, add the roads, make them a lot more readable. And that'll come in the next iteration. With the next, along those lines, the next iteration is, I think it's time that I bring everything together and get a draft of the master plan in front of you. So a lot of new faces since we started in 2016, and you know, I think at the end of the last meeting, Bob and casually mentioned to me like, "Hey, we need to get these guys up to speed." And so with that draft, you can see what we've done from community input, demographics, and how we got here.
If you got any written verbiage that you could email to us to get to them,
Okay.
give them something to read in the meantime
Yes.
to help. Good idea. And include myself in it as well, 'cause I missed out on the first part of it.
Okay. Yep, I can do that. You got some stuff. Okay.
The more we can get to them and us study in the meantime, the more effective we can be.
I agree. Okay.
And
Fine.
our next meeting is July 11th.
Right.
What kind of time frame are you on?
Yeah, I looked at my calendar and I'm a month from now would be good, but I'm going to be on vacation at the end of July. We can look at dates in August. That would give me enough time to get my staff to pull this all together, and so that it's what we're getting, so we've got something to grist for the mill here. 2 weeks isn't going to do it.
Right, right. What's our date for August? August 1st, look all right with you, Alan?
I have a conflict on the night of the 1st, on the night of the 8th, and the night of the 15th. I do have the 22nd and 29th open.
Okay. Looks like 20 seconds. Anybody conflicts with the 29th?